It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, February 27th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that has some questions about the decisions that were made this past weekend in both games, to be honest.
Some questions, like 1,000 questions.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, where the state of the Flyers are at this point in the season. Plus, it's Monday, so we will have our Nemesis of the week.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where we post about our latest episodes and Flyers news. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. We will have a mailbag this week, so get those questions in. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. So subscribe. You will get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube, so subscribe there as well. So, Russ, we got a bunch of updates and decisions and stuff coming from Torts. And I think that's really where, the questionable decision making that we're talking about has come into play. So we do know now that Travis Konechny is officially on IR. No real timetable right now, but it's bad enough that he's officially on IR, and that's
Right.
where obviously we got the Desnoyers call up and all of that. We'll get into that, but I think that there's some incongruity between what he's saying and what the situation actually is. And, on Friday, we got, some churn again about the Joel Farabee situation, where he's like, agents should stay out of it. And, he is
Agents should
understood.
shut up.
Yeah, and then, Joel Farabee comes back with he saw the rumors, but he's committed to being a Flyer. Um, and then Torts saying that he didn't know about Travis Sanheim's family being in Calgary for the game when he got scratched. Would it have affected his decision? No. And it's brutal because I remember very distinctly at the beginning of the season when he was like, "Oh, I'm getting to know these guys." And he spoke at length about wanting to get to know these guys as people, that these are people first and hockey players second. And he doesn't even know a basic thing like where somebody is from and if maybe their family might be in town for that game. And that just doesn't add up to me.
No, I know. It's just there's always going to be this mystery with Torts that way. I think he knows. I just think he doesn't want to always reveal. But so here's the big existential question that I came up with after that press conference yesterday after the Devils. The big question is, okay, you said you're not equipped to win games for scoring 4 goals. You can't do it. Okay. So we have to be a team that's equipped to win games 2-1. Okay. But I'll tell you, they're not equipped for that either. And that's why I think Tortorella has to sort of change the way he's coaching, because he still feels like he has to win 2-1 like it's 5 years ago. This team can't lock it down. They're incapable of doing that. Now, they might be incapable of scoring 4 goals, but we've seen them capable of scoring 3. So there's a happy medium here. And maybe the happy medium is maybe it is time to interject a little more offense into this team and not worrying as much on defense. Because, look, it doesn't matter where you go in the standings here. You have to find something that works, because 75% of these guys are going to be back next year. And, you've got 20-something games left in the season, and you really don't have a method yet on what to do with this team, how to handle it, who's the lines. One line is set on this team. That's it. That's it. Through most of the season, I get there was an experimental phase, but that phase should almost be over in the sense that you have an idea now of what everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, and I don't feel he does.
Well, and that's to me where some of the questionable decision making comes into play with him because in the game against Montreal, right, 11 forward, 7D. And we have seen that not work on several
No,
occasions. And
but
it
he
was
did score a goal like I want to say 4 or 5 games ago, Braun did, and that's what I think still perpetuated this like it could work, and it was a bad idea.
It was a bad idea against a team like Montreal,
That's fast.
especially. Yeah, that's much faster. And so you need those forward skaters who can get back to help on defense. And he kept comparing this game against New Jersey and the game against Montreal to some degree to the two games against Edmonton where they did play well defensively for the most part, against a very strong fast team, and why didn't it work this time around? And you have to say, well, in the game against New Jersey, you sat Cam York. That certainly wasn't going to help against
Nope.
a strong, fast
One of
team.
your
And
best skaters.
right. So whether or not it was the right decision to make for Cam York, you have to look at that as a factor in the outcome of the game. And that sort of recognition wasn't there for me. And I think that, when you sit JVR, now whether that's for trade strategy or whether it's because he's legitimately banged up, as he said, that is also going to affect your lines,
Mhm.
as a domino effect. And then guys are playing in a line blender and they're not covering for each other in the same way that they did when it was more stable lines. And we look at January versus February and the results. And the second he started churning stuff up, that's when things start falling apart. And so overall, I just feel like there's some really questionable decision making being made in the lineup choices.
Yeah, I think they're struggling with that. I think players are struggling with playing with each other, although they should all be very familiar with what they could all do and can't do. I think players like Kevin Hayes are struggling with uh, just giving that full 60-minute effort again. I think there's a lot of different things like this going on, and I think the coaching staff is having trouble with that. Now, maybe the trading deadline will fix some of that, but I think the answer lies within John Tortorella because he even said, I have to sort of get the message through that we have to play the way we played against Edmonton all the time. And I'm not getting that message through. And part of it may be what you're talking about, interpersonal, because they are humans. And then the other part may be what I'm talking about, like, hey, you're going to have to open things up a little bit more and teach a little different philosophy to these guys because even next year, it's hard to believe that the Flyers might have a lockdown defense where you could win games 2-1. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that's possible. So I think he needs to move off of that. And I think all of those things are sort of failed strategies.
Right. And it's also, I think, some adjustment problems. And I think that's, partially what you're saying here is that,
Mm-hmm.
the Flyers had a small degree of success defensively for a stretch of games there. And other teams are now adjusting to that. And
Yes.
so, and that in combination with, this personnel upheaval, I think that, he hasn't adjusted to the teams figuring out his scheme. Right.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
so it's just one of those things where I am glad to some degree that he called himself out, that there's
Mm-hmm.
something missing in his communication that's, creating a team that can play well against Edmonton, but not against Montreal. I
Right.
think that's a huge factor there. And so I will give him some credit for,
Mm-hmm.
shouldering some of the blame here. But I
But
just
there's
think that,
effects to players here that are going on, not to
yeah.
interrupt. Like, I've covered Joel Farabee long before the Flyers, and this is the lowest I've ever seen his confidence. The lowest. Now, he may be hurting and not talking about it. That's fine. But he's not even confident. When he has the puck in the offensive zone, he's not even confidently shooting or passing anymore. He's just looking to hot potato it and get it off his stick. And that's not Joel Farabee. And so I would hope the coaching staff would acknowledge that they're seeing this and try and talk to him about it. But it doesn't seem like these conversations happen. It just seems like practice happens. You do what you're supposed to do in practice, and then you play in games, and you're supposed to do what you do in games because everybody's professionals. But there's a lot that goes on between the ears that does need talking about too.
Yeah, there absolutely is. We are going to get more into the specifics of the 2 weekend games, talk about Elliot Desnoyers' NHL debut, and talk about what's going on with Felix Sandstrom at this point coming up next.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athletic Greens. I started using Athletic Greens because I wanted better gut health, more energy, optimized immune system, and hated taking pills and vitamins. And I wanted a supplement that actually tastes great. With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, and focus. It costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. Athletic Greens contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
As we know, the NHL trade deadline is this Friday, March 3rd. Join us live on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern as Locked On NHL hosts break down the biggest deals from around the league. Locked On NHL, your team every day.
Let's hope there's still some big deals to come. A lot of dominoes are falling, man. I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to cover any trades the Flyers may make on our feed. So make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube for all the breaking news and our analysis. So, Russ, I can't help but think that I haven't felt like I did last season about this team since this last stretch of games. And it just feels like a 2021-22 level of rock bottom here. What's your take on that?
I think it's worse. And I think it's rock bottom again. But I think it's worse this time because you have a coach that was supposed to fix some things. I get it. He's not a miracle worker. There was only so much you could do with this team, but this team is falling apart. Like it is. We see it. Yesterday's game, fine. I can't blame the goaltending because there's a million high danger chances every game. There's guys in the crease all the time. And my basic problem with all of that is if they're supposed to be this physical team, which no matter who is playing, Nick Seeler, the glue guy, or anybody else, they should be clearing out the crease for the goalies, and they're not. They're just simply not. And I get it. If you're not fast enough, that's fine. But there's other things you could do in this game to sort of help out your goalie, help out your teammates. And a lot of that isn't occurring. And that is what I think is a big problem here. And again, you were supposed to have a coach that's supposed to be curing some of that. The culture's better, but not much else is.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because if you especially look at the game against New Jersey, Sam Ersson, God bless him, he was making some really tremendous saves. And while he is generally very good at containing pucks so there aren't a ton of rebounds, there's going to be some.
Yes.
And even if the Flyers D got some sticks in there, they weren't able to corral the puck and get it out of there. There was just this level of skill missing in combination with New Jersey just working harder
or even
to get
just
the
use
puck
the body
out of their hand.
Like New Jersey's not a physical team. You could try and body guys off the puck. Actually, what was interesting was early on when the Flyers drew some penalties against New Jersey, it was because New Jersey was actually being very physical. And like the Flyers just weren't even that physical. Yeah, there was a fight, so what? But I'm just talking about actual playing, actually just taking some guys out in the crease. That wasn't going on.
Yeah, it just really wasn't. And I think that was a huge factor there. And at a certain point, like they gave up
Yeah. Oh yeah.
defensively at a level that I have not really seen
And
since
poor
last
Urson was
season.
there to, like, basically say at the end of the game, S happens in the locker room, and like he had a great take on it for a young
Mhm.
guy. And Torts may not be wrong. This could make him stronger, but nobody wants to see a young goalie hung out to dry to that degree.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been very clear that goaltending is not the Flyers' problem,
Right.
nowhere near. And so I think the Hart and Urson combo is a very solid goaltending duo for this team. It's just what is the support around it? And that was, one of the big problems from last season, right?
Yeah.
And when Torts comes in and says this is a major problem that I'm going to fix, and it's very clearly not fixed,
Right.
and it feels like they made some progress for a little bit, but again, I feel like they've backpedaled a little bit
Yes.
here, and I feel like that's dangerous, and that's like when you lose, it's like losing an edge on your skates. I feel like
Yeah.
this team has lost an edge.
Yeah. Like, look, and this is to the fans that wanted them to tank. If they were tanking, I wouldn't be giving this commentary, but they're not tanking. And that's what makes it worse.
Yeah, to a large degree. I do want to talk about Elliot Desnoyers in his
Yeah.
NHL debut because what a rough game for him to get started in. And, you want to have a positive experience for that and good memories. And a 7-0 loss is not that for
No.
sure. But I will say, he played pretty well. I think, considering how he was thrown in there, he made a
Mhm.
couple of really good moves. He and Ali Lixel almost
Yeah, there's a little
combined
bit of
on a
chemistry.
goal.
He had some
Yeah,
scoring chances, couple shots on that. One puck hopped off his stick where he had a great scoring chance. He does forecheck. You know, everybody's saying what a great two-way player he is. They were being nice. He's a rookie. That is something he has to work at. And faceoffs, he really has to work at. Like he's not at an NHL center faceoff level. Like that's obvious, but that's okay. I'm okay with all that. And I know fans were overreacting, like, "Hey, you got to leave him up because they like his skating and they like that."
right.
This game was as good for Lixel as it was for Desnoyers. But
Yeah,
again, but here's the problem. I do want young guys to get the experience, right? But if every game's going to be 6-1, 7-0, there is a point where you say you don't want these guys to experience this much losing, and it's better to be in Lehigh where they're actually fighting for a playoff spot. There is a fine line for that.
yeah, and I do want to say that Denoyer, I think, showed that he could play at the NHL level. Like there's absolute potential there,
There's
and he
potential
was
for
he
sure.
was he was not intimidated by playing
No,
NHL level players. He wasn't intimidated by the top level players that New Jersey has. And so, and even post game, he has very high confidence in
he
himself
does.
and his game. And to your point, I don't want that ruined by
Right.
any like
No, and there
negative
is
thing.
something there. We've
Yeah,
seen
there is.
teams in the past let their guys get some level of activity in the NHL and then sort of shade them and keep them away from it. And the Flyers may be in that boat. We don't know yet.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's related to is this sort of a rock bottom-ish situation is again continuing to look at the power play and the lack of improvement there. And I understand in Montreal they didn't have any power plays, but they
Hmm.
were 0 for 2 against New Jersey. They only had one shot on goal total in those two power plays, and you could see like they just weren't managing the puck well and
No,
creating the lanes for
no. New
themselves.
Jersey knew
And
exactly what they were going to do, and they were the aggressors. Like their penalty kill was
yeah.
the aggressor.
Yeah, and at the same time, you understand they're trying some things. I mean, Travis Sanheim got some power play time,
Yes.
uh, and that is a relatively new thing for this year.
They've tried it
And
once
it's just
before, I think, this season, and they
yeah.
bailed out of it, and then they're trying it again.
Yeah, well, I guess, with JVR out and with York out, like, they had to put somebody else
And
in there
connecting and
and
connecting.
connect me. Yeah, so, they had to put some different guys in
They did.
there, and they did. So, there is something to that aspect of it, but yeah, it was just a really frustrating weekend of hockey overall,
It's more than that though.
especially.
This is going back to the West Coast trip to now. Like this is a
Yes.
lot of bad play in a row. A lot of it.
Mhm.
And a lot of bad habits, slow skating, slow to react to the puck, not being first to pucks. Like, Montreal was first to like almost every puck in that game. All these things are piling up now. And the problem is, it's like the trade deadline is only going to cure some of it. And there
Yeah,
has to be, and I'm not saying the Flyers need to win every game. Fans don't want them to, and I don't blame them. But what I'm saying is there has to be something where you say, okay, now I kind of see a path. I don't see a path. I do
right.
not.
Right. That's a huge part of it as well. We've got a light week of games this week, and just really looking ahead. We just have the game against the Rangers to look forward
Well,
to
that's a key game
on
because
Wednesday.
you know why? Because that's the game that Chuck Fletcher will speak before the game and
Hmm.
talk about the trade deadline. And he's probably going to be asked, why is he not being perceived as being aggressive, where we see all these teams making trades? We just saw a 1-for-1 happen on Sunday with Dadonov going to Dallas and Gurianov going to Montreal. I mean, Montreal's, getting back a player that actually Gurianov has a lot of talent, but he just only showed it 1 year in Dallas. I know Flyers fans, some of them were asking me about Gurianov. Were they in on this? I don't know. But the thing is, the perception right now with the Flyers is they're not being aggressive. And the only reason that's being said is because they haven't made one deal. If they've made one deal by now, like with all these other teams making deals, I think it would change their perception a little bit. But the fact that nothing has happened is an issue.
Well, that will be an important hint as to the nemesis of the week, which we will talk about coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you gotta try a Built Bar. My goal has been to eat a little healthier this year, but I don't want to compromise taste. And I have got just the thing. You gotta try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. It's covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. They've only got 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, with 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. We've been talking about ordering Built Bars at built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Head to your nearest Walmart today. You can go to the pharmacy section. They've got a 4-bar box with some great selections: cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie, batter, and churro. You can thank me later. All right, Russ. So, our nemesis of the week. And if you're newer to Locked On Flyers, each and every week, we take a look at what's going on in Flyers land and in the world of hockey and say what is bothering us or making us the most nervous about this upcoming week. Last week, we talked about having the 2 back-to-backs in 1 week with different challenges. We see how that went. We just talked about that stretch of games and how it really illuminated a lot of the weaknesses of this team this season. And then, as Russ talked about, with other teams being pretty active, the trade deadline is my nemesis this week. When you see that, based on the history of what Chuck Fletcher has done, you see that he negotiates from a position of weakness. And I think that this trade deadline is so important to set this team up in the right direction for next year and in gaining draft assets, perhaps a prospect asset if that's the right deal to be made. But the Flyers are missing 2 second-round draft picks over the next couple of years, which is very key into building a robust prospect pipeline. And I think that's got to be one of your top priorities here. And my confidence in Chuck Fletcher to accomplish these things is pretty low, I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's overly disciplined, and
Very low
that's
risk guy.
yeah. And look, I ask around, we look around. I gave a couple of hints at some things I had heard about a couple of Flyers. One of them got was out of the game in JVR, but other than that, there's not a lot of smoke there, and there's not a lot of reporting out there. So that's where it's like, okay, there's a right to be concerned here because they do need to walk away with some stuff. And the problem is, again, right now, good luck getting a 2023 second round pick. You've got to trade a star now to be able to get that in a deal. You see some of these picks are now going out to 2026. So,
Right.
Again, to your point, if I'm getting draft picks offered to me in 2025, then I'm taking players. And I've got to have my guys all around the table and understand that, say, hey, let's try and dig out some players here that we think have a chance because there's opportunity here, as Chuck would always say, because some of those draft picks will live on well beyond this administration and doesn't really help even John Tortorella. And you got to try and
Yeah.
help him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it. And that's why I mentioned picking up prospects.
Yeah.
It's that we need some help now to get this team going in the right direction. And you're
Yep.
right, those 2025, 2026 draft picks, while good in theory, for long-term purposes, aren't going to help this team now. And, I think about Owen Tippett, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, who, was a part of that Claude Giroux deal. Now, this is Chuck Fletcher, right? But I think, Owen Tippett has been, to me, I think slightly better than expected.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that
that's fair.
he has managed to improve to a certain degree on the Flyers, where he just was not able to break through with the Panthers. And so I think there is potential for things like that if you
Yeah.
trade for a prospect, and hopefully you can get somebody that's just slightly better than Owen Tippett, right? But I think that it's an indicator that it is possible, and Chuck Fletcher can do it when he wants to. But again, anything they can do to get second round picks this year or next year, I think would
It's going to be
be
hard. Like it's
helpful.
really going to be
Yeah.
hard, and that's what I'm saying. You have to just like again, just a player like Gurianov with the skill level he has and speed. There is a point where he could be turned around. He had 20 goals a couple years ago. Could you have traded JVR for that? Maybe. We don't
Yeah.
know. But that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Like take some risks that way.
Yeah, exactly. I did mention that the Rangers are the one game during the week this week. We could be seeing a trade deadline team debut in Patrick Kane, maybe
Yeah.
playing for the Rangers against the
Who's no
Flyers.
longer traveling with the team with the
Right.
Blackhawks.
So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But yeah, it's a rough week. So in terms
Buckle
of
up.
seeing what other teams around the league do who are sellers versus what the Flyers can do. And it's going to be, I think, a huge benchmark point for Chuck Fletcher.
This trade deadline is brought to you by Mylanta.
All right. That will do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll get caught up on what the Phantoms were up to over the past week and any latest news with the Flyers. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in your mailbag questions via Twitter at Lockdown Flyers. You can email us at lockdownflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen. Now make your second listen Game to Game NHL. It's every moment, every top performance, every result. They cover every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. It's on your Locked On NHL feed wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.